Her phone lit on the kitchen counter, previewing a message from Ben Harper, her coworker. I picked it up and read, "Bring the spare key. Meeting canceled. Come over now." Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? Ben's name sat at the top of a long thread with photos and pinned locations. I scrolled one screen and saw, "Use the side entrance. Door sticks unless pushed hard." A calendar thumbnail displayed his office logo beside her initials, plainly visible. I pressed the side buttons and captured clean screenshots of every visible segment. I placed the phone flat again and watched another preview appear immediately. It read, "Delete later. Use personal, not work." I opened the camera on my device and photographed her screen directly. Then I locked her phone and returned it to the counter quietly. I opened our shared laptop and checked the messaging sync toggle. The status showed enabled, linked through her personal email address. I clicked export and saved the visible thread to a local folder. A new preview flashed on her phone while the file processed. It read, "Parking spot open near the loading gate. I'll wait there." I photographed that preview and included it in the same archive. I opened the exported file and verified timestamps against the captured images. The alignment was exact, with sender labels matching contact entries. I added a text document noting device names and visible indicators. Then I closed the laptop and wiped fingerprints from the case. She walked into the kitchen and reached for coffee without looking up. "Did you see my phone?" she asked, keeping her voice even. I said, "It's on the counter. It kept lighting up." She nodded once and said, "Ben's asking about a client deck." I replied, "You can call him back." She picked up the phone and turned away slightly. "I'll handle it later," she said, tapping the screen quickly. I rinsed a glass and set it upside down on the rack. The message previews stopped appearing while she stood there. I dried my hands, grabbed my keys, and left for the office. In the car, I backed up the screenshots to a private drive. Each file name contained sender, device, and capture sequence. I added the exported thread and a short README describing steps taken. The archive compressed cleanly and displayed a checksum for verification. At a red light, I checked her public office directory for Ben's full details. His listing showed department, job title, and manager, with a direct number. I saved the profile page as a PDF for later reference. A simple search returned his professional profile and a company headshot. I stored those copies beside the message archive. At my desk, I opened our shared calendar and compared blocks. Her recurring late review entries matched Ben's project meetings precisely. Their locations alternated between headquarters and the satellite office garage. I printed the calendar view and marked overlaps with a thin pen. I opened email on the shared laptop and searched for device authorizations. A login alert showed her phone connected to the messaging app recently. The authorized device name matched the label from my screenshots. I captured those lines and added them to the folder immediately. During lunch, I called our mutual friend Jason Reed and kept the request simple. "Do you know Ben Harper's manager name?" He answered, "Karen Mills runs that team. Why?" I said, "Needed a contact for a vendor question." He replied, "That's her name. You can find the extension online." I thanked him and ended the call without comment. I searched the internal contact page and located Karen's listing. I saved the page and included it with the directory files. After work, Laura sent a short message. "Running late, covering a deliverable." I replied, "Understood." A new email alert appeared on our shared laptop moments later. The subject line read, "Tonight's wrap-up," with Ben listed as the sender. I didn't open it. I photographed the header only. I added the image to the archive and synced the folder again. The structure now showed messages, calendar overlaps, device authorizations, and visible metadata. Each piece stood alone and supported the others cleanly. I drove past the satellite office garage and parked on the street. Ben's car sat near the loading gate, clearly marked by the company permit. An entry keypad blinked beside the service door, visible from the sidewalk. I photographed the scene without zoom and captured the plate in frame. A rideshare car pulled in and idled briefly near the same spot. I stored the images and locked my phone. Then I started the engine and headed home. At home, I created a master index listing every artifact by source and method. I wrote short labels: phone preview, exported thread, calendar overlaps, device authorization, directory pages, site photos. I checked the archive integrity and duplicated it to another private drive. The folder now read like a simple report rather than a complaint. Nothing speculative, only visible actions and documented records. I closed the laptop and set it aside. The next step would require a clean timeline and a formal channel. The next morning, she left early, saying she had a client review. I opened her laptop and confirmed that the message sync remained active. The thread with Ben continued overnight, including one message from him reading, "Next time, delete the top part." I added the new lines to the archive and updated the timestamp list. Then I checked her work calendar again. The client review was scheduled for a different department, yet she had no meetings listed there. I printed both versions, hers and the official company calendar, and placed them side by side. The gaps were identical to the ones linked to her messages with Ben. At work, I began charting connections. My role in operations gave me access to internal scheduling software, which included visitor logs. Ben's name appeared on our office sign-in sheet twice during her supposed external meetings. That overlap matched precisely with her text history. I added the sign-in data to my folder and labeled it cross-confirmation. Facts repeated themselves neatly. That evening, she texted, "Running behind again, office dinner." I replied, "Take your time." Then I checked the restaurant she mentioned. No corporate event appeared on the reservation list. I called the host and asked, "Do you have a table under Laura Kent?" The host said no, but confirmed one under Ben Harper for 2 guests. I thanked her and ended the call. I didn't drive there. Observation without interruption mattered more. The following day, I checked the phone backup. Her conversation with Ben included short directives. "Send the file here. Keep this private. Don't mention Karen." Those weren't personal notes. They resembled coordination. I exported another batch and sorted them by phrasing. They sounded like professional concealment more than casual talk. That made HR's policy references relevant. I downloaded the employee handbook and highlighted the clause prohibiting personal relationships between coworkers in reporting lines. Ben's name appeared under her collaborative project in the company directory. The condition applied directly. Over the weekend, I set up an automatic email forwarder to collect anything sent from Ben to her shared address. Each time one arrived, it duplicated to my archive drive. The subject lines followed a pattern, short codes and meeting abbreviations. I matched them to her work entries. The alignment was exact. On Monday, she mentioned visiting another branch for project audits. I checked the branch directory. Ben's name appeared on the same visitor rotation. The document dated 2 weeks prior showed them signed in together. I saved a copy through the system access request, labeled branch coordination. The pattern no longer looked accidental. It resembled scheduling by design. That night, I asked casually, Do you ever work with Ben outside regular hours? She paused and said, Sometimes. He helps with backlog. I nodded and asked, Do you ever meet clients together? She replied, Rarely. I said, All right, and changed the subject. Her answers were short, and her phone stayed face down on the table. Later, while she showered, I checked the sync once more. The most recent message read, Don't forget the backup pass. Karen's leaving early tomorrow. I photographed it and returned the device to its place. That one line proved they were coordinating during work hours under her manager's supervision window. I appended it to the master file. At that stage, suspicion wasn't uncertainty. The structure of evidence showed order, motive, and process. Nothing emotional remained. Only a clear pattern waiting for confirmation from inside the company. I began collecting verifiable material through legitimate access points. Our home devices synced through a shared cloud account, which stored mirrored text backups. I exported the latest archive, checked the timestamps, and noted that message flow between her and Ben spiked during business hours. Each line included attachments labeled Internal Review, Slide Update, or After Lunch, all unrelated to her assigned projects. I arranged them chronologically and highlighted deviations from her official schedule. Nothing in the records contained emotion. Only transactional content that read like logistics between two people hiding coordination. Next, I checked our shared internet bill. The usage logs showed recurring connections to the company's VPN from her laptop outside standard hours. Each session matched message timestamps with Ben's metadata, pulled from chat headers. That consistency turned random suspicion into mapped activity. I stored those files under remote sessions. At the office, I logged into our corporate collaboration portal and viewed team workspace permissions. Her profile had been added to a private document group owned by Ben. The folder name matched the project code she once mentioned, but wasn't assigned to. I requested access under internal audit procedure and retrieved the metadata list. The document edit history revealed both their names on consecutive entries, often minutes apart. That sequence formed an electronic handshake, proof of shared activity beyond protocol. To confirm her movements, I used publicly accessible visitor logs from her building. The security desk maintained digital sign-ins visible to employees with registered credentials. I filtered by her name and compared timestamps with Ben's recorded entries. They appeared within narrow windows across multiple evenings. I exported the table, converted it into a timeline, and attached it to the main folder. The data required no interpretation. It spoke in alignment. Later that night, I checked her phone's auto-sync to cloud photos. Several images showed familiar locations, conference rooms, hallways, and 2 nearby restaurants. Each contained metadata tags that placed her within blocks of Ben's office. I downloaded the files, confirmed the GPS coordinates, and included them in the folder. The sequence grew structured. Communication logs, device sessions, workspace records, and geolocation matches. Once the factual framework solidified, I searched company policy archives online. The section titled Workplace Conduct and Relationship Disclosure defined any undisclosed personal interaction between employees sharing data access as a compliance breach. The condition required mandatory HR review. I printed that clause and bookmarked the reference ID for citation. It would serve as the procedural base for submission. Before closing the investigation phase, I verified Ben's marital status through public records. A short search returned a wedding registry under his name, confirming an active spouse listed in the same city. That detail strengthened the professional risk factor. HR policy referenced potential liability exposure when undisclosed relationships overlap married employees in supervisory roles. The policy number matched the conduct clause I had highlighted earlier. At that stage, all the necessary data existed. There was no need for confrontation or dialogue. Emotionless verification had replaced speculation. The documentation formed a chain that any compliance officer could follow line by line. My role was to maintain integrity, preserve copies, and ensure digital authenticity. I encrypted the master file, uploaded it to a private drive, and created duplicate access keys under separate credentials. Everything was ready for formal escalation. The remaining step was deciding when to act, and through which channel the record would reach HR without deviation or delay. If this were you, would you act or wait? I drafted a factual report summarizing every record collected. The document contained screenshots, message logs, cloud metadata, and printed copies of her synchronized correspondence with Ben. Each section listed its verification source, file path, timestamp, and device identifier. I titled the report, Compliance Verification Submission. There were no personal comments, no opinions, just a procedural outline matching the policy format. I uploaded it to a secure folder and prepared to send the link to Human Resources. The system required an internal contact, so I entered the name of Karen Mills, Ben's direct manager, whose profile I had saved earlier. At 9:00 a.m., I sent the email through my professional account. The subject line read, Documented Conduct Concern, Verification Attached. The body included one paragraph. Please review attached evidence relevant to Policy Clause 4.12 regarding employee conduct. All timestamps and metadata have been preserved for compliance. I included the access link and signed with my name and department. There was no emotional language, no accusation, only submission of verifiable material. Within an hour, the HR portal registered a read receipt. The system assigned an internal case number automatically. Shortly after, I received a calendar invite labeled Confidential Review Session. The participants listed were Karen Mills, HR Officer Daniel Morris, and Legal Associate Sarah Bell. The meeting location read Internal Conference Room 2B. I accepted the invite without comment. During the meeting, they presented printed copies of several screenshots from my file. Daniel opened with a simple statement. We appreciate your documentation. Can you confirm that these materials originated from a shared device? I said yes, confirming the shared cloud connection. He asked, Did you alter or edit any content? I replied, No. Everything was exported directly, without modification. Karen nodded, reviewing the image of a message reading, Delete this after. Door sticks. She marked it with a pen. Sarah asked, Were you aware of any ongoing project linking these two employees? I said, No official record connects them in our directory. The interview lasted 20 minutes. Conducted like a procedural audit. When it ended, they thanked me for cooperation and said, We'll proceed per protocol. That evening, Laura texted, Did HR contact you today? I replied, Not directly. She didn't follow up. The next morning, her office pass failed at the building entrance. She called from the parking lot, saying her access card was inactive. I said, You should email HR. She hung up. By midday, word spread through the office that Ben had been escorted from the building. HR released a neutral statement citing temporary suspension pending internal review. Official communication channels avoided specifics. Employees speculated quietly, but no one asked me questions. That night, Laura came home early. She placed her badge on the table and said, "I'm on leave." I asked, "Paid or unpaid?" She said, "They didn't say yet." I asked, "Did they mention Ben?" She didn't answer. I continued, "The record spoke clearly." She said, "You went too far." I replied, "The policy applied itself." She left the room without another word. Later, I received an automated HR acknowledgement confirming receipt of my report as part of the final case documentation. The note thanked me for cooperation with the integrity review process. I stored it with the rest of the folder and locked the drive. The investigation phase had ended. The next actions would proceed internally, outside my control. Procedure had replaced speculation, and formal action had replaced reaction. Everything now moved under institutional logic, leaving no room for denial or reinterpretation. After HR confirmed the suspension, I focused on stabilizing the next steps. The company's process would move slowly, but my objective was to ensure the review reached a permanent conclusion. Revenge, in this situation, meant establishing clarity that couldn't be reversed or questioned. My method relied on documentation and timing rather than confrontation. First, I compiled every HR-related document into a single indexed report. The cover page listed case number, submission date, and verification sources. I included the compliance clause highlighting relationship disclosure with annotations showing direct violations. I then added a structured appendix containing message logs, synchronized device traces, and the visitor records already on file. Each entry included its cross-reference ID. The formatting mirrored corporate audit reports. I wanted the file to read as a complete compliance brief, ready for external audit if necessary. Next, I forwarded the same report to the company's legal department using their internal intake form. The form allowed anonymous uploads, but I identified myself clearly. I selected supporting documentation for active case. The submission generated an automatic acknowledgement. By routing it through both HR and legal, I ensured the file entered two separate record systems, making removal impossible without trace. Once the document was secure, I checked external channels. The corporate ethics hotline accepted reports of policy breaches through an encrypted web form. I uploaded a short statement summarizing confirmed facts. Unauthorized use of company resources for personal interaction between employees in active reporting chain. I attached the internal case number to align it with HR's file. That created redundancy, a procedural safeguard against internal closure before resolution. At home, I changed all shared account passwords and removed her access to devices. I didn't block or argue. I simply cut off synchronization. Cloud storage logs confirmed her sessions were revoked. The shared laptop was reformatted and reassigned to my professional use. Every trace of shared digital space was removed. That act marked the practical separation of our data and routine. The next step was professional distance. I requested a temporary reassignment to another department under the justification of workflow realignment. Management approved without questioning the reason. That decision positioned me away from any direct fallout once HR concluded their review. It also protected me from potential retaliation disguised as workplace tension. 2 weeks later, I checked the HR portal again. The case status showed final review, documentation verified. That meant the legal department had completed its assessment. I downloaded the status summary and added it to my folder. At this point, I prepared one last submission, a formal compliance follow-up letter. The letter outlined why unresolved cases risked reputation and policy integrity. It wasn't emotional or threatening. It was professional language referencing internal standards. I copied the corporate compliance officer on the message. By creating layers of accountability, HR, legal, ethics, and compliance, I guaranteed that the outcome would remain public within the company. Even if no one spoke about it, the records existed across multiple systems. That structure was the essence of revenge in procedural form. Silent, undeniable, and permanent. I didn't monitor her messages anymore. There was no need. The process I built would run independently, fueled by institutional momentum. Each department followed policy, and each policy carried automatic consequences. My role was complete once the system began enforcing itself. Once the final compliance letter was sent, events unfolded predictably. HR initiated formal disciplinary procedures, guided by their own timeline. I received a short acknowledgement from the legal department confirming my file had been reviewed and validated. The note contained no sentiment, just a case ID and the phrase, "Documentation accepted under conduct clause." That line meant the process had moved past discretion. Policy now dictated the outcome. 3 days later, her company email access was revoked. The HR system automatically sent her a notice of administrative leave, citing internal investigation protocol. She called once, said, "Did you do this?" I answered, "The documents did." She said nothing further and disconnected. Shortly after, Ben's profile disappeared from the internal directory. A colleague mentioned quietly that he'd been placed under extended suspension pending final review. I didn't comment. I continued working without deviation, arriving on time, leaving on schedule. Around the office, conversation softened when I entered rooms. People knew an incident was under review, though details remained confidential. HR operated discreetly, but visible signs, revoked badges, empty desks, adjusted reporting lines, spoke for themselves. The system was executing exactly as designed. Meanwhile, my case file expanded automatically as departments exchanged verification notes. Compliance cross-referenced network activity, HR logged interview transcripts, and legal appended termination draft templates. I didn't participate further. Observation replaced involvement. My earlier submissions worked as self-sustaining mechanisms. The institutions processed their conclusions without personal input. At home, she began staying elsewhere. Her belongings gradually disappeared from the apartment. I didn't ask where she went. Bills reflected only my transactions now. The absence registered as an administrative change, not a disruption. I archived her remaining files under a folder labeled Personal, Closed. The drive contained no images, no messages, just receipts and old statements. Order replaced conversation. By the following week, HR finalized findings. The official notice arrived via email titled Case Resolution Summary. The message stated that both employees had violated Conduct Clause 4.12 by engaging in undisclosed personal activity during work hours using company communication systems. Termination was effective immediately. Attached was a confidentiality acknowledgement affirming that my cooperation had met procedural standards. I stored the message in the final folder and labeled it Outcome. I didn't forward the file or share it. Silence maintained control. The only follow-up came from HR, asking if I required any further protection measures. I declined. There was nothing left to protect. The procedure was complete and results recorded. Revenge didn't appear as confrontation or drama. It appeared as documentation validated by policy. A few days later, Karen, her manager, stopped by my desk. She said quietly, "HR closed everything yesterday. You handled it professionally." I replied, "I followed protocol." She nodded once and moved on. Her tone carried neutrality, the same as mine. Inside corporate systems, neutrality is finality. That evening, I reviewed the entire chain one last time, from the first message preview to the final HR notice. The progression was linear and flawless. Every step followed a documented rule. I deleted the duplicate archives from my backup drives, keeping only the signed outcome letter. Would you call this revenge or justice? The official outcome circulated internally as a quiet update in the weekly compliance memo. The section titled Policy Enforcement Actions listed 2 terminated employees under Code 4.12. No names disclosed. Anyone familiar with the structure could identify them easily. Conversations in corridors dropped when I passed. Curiosity existed, but no one asked. The event became procedure, not gossip. In corporate environments, silence means acknowledgement without confirmation. I noticed subtle changes afterward. Security began enforcing stricter access policies for personal devices. HR implemented new disclosure requirements for collaborative projects. Training modules appeared on the intranet titled Ethics and Relationship Boundaries. Each policy reflected the same pattern that had originated with my submission. My case had become a quiet precedent. It moved beyond individual consequence into institutional correction. That was the clearest form of closure a process could achieve. At home, separation became a sequence of logistical tasks. I removed her name from shared accounts and forwarded mail to her new address once she filed it officially. The divorce filing went through uncontested. The document required no courtroom statements, only signatures. I reviewed the terms, initialed each page, and mailed it back. Within weeks, a notice of dissolution arrived in my inbox. I added it to the same archive that contained the HR outcome. Both documents represented endings governed by structure, not emotion. Occasionally, people from her office reached out indirectly. One message from a coworker read, "We didn't expect it to end that way." I didn't reply. Another asked if I had been the one who reported them. I ignored that too. Evidence already existed where it mattered. Explanations served no purpose once systems acted. Truth had been recorded through policy, not opinion. Outside of work, life resumed its earlier rhythm. My hours stayed consistent, expenses stabilized, and communication narrowed to essentials. The absence of conflict created order. I replaced shared furniture, repainted the apartment, and kept everything documented for asset tracking. The process felt procedural, identical to closing a contract file. Nothing required reflection, only maintenance. News about Ben reached me indirectly. A supplier mentioned he had attempted to join another firm in the same industry, but failed background verification due to unresolved internal records. His employment file contained the termination code, which automatically triggered the industry compliance database. That barrier was permanent. Sophie, his wife, filed for separation soon after. The outcome extended beyond my actions, carried by formal systems maintaining their own continuity. Laura took freelance work outside the corporate sector. Her digital presence disappeared gradually. No social profiles, no updates, no contact. The space she left existed as data only, a record of conduct, termination, and divorce filings stored in independent archives. Each record operated under a different institution, yet together, they formed a complete loop of consequence. At work, my manager requested permission to use my documentation method for future internal audits. He said, "Your case showed how clean data makes HR faster." I approved the request. The method became part of a new integrity protocol. My role evolved into operations lead for data compliance, formalized through promotion notice 2 months later. That advancement wasn't personal victory. It was procedural recognition of accuracy and control. By then, the fallout had finished shifting. Systems absorbed the disturbance, processed it, and adjusted policy accordingly. The individuals involved faded into records. The company continued unchanged, but stronger in verification. My life aligned with that same principle. Documentation replaced reaction. Structure replaced trust. Months passed before the file disappeared from the active HR system and moved into archive status. I received a notice titled Case Record Retained Per Policy, confirming that the documentation would remain preserved for 7 years. That line marked the official end of the process. What began as a personal discovery had evolved into a structural record, an example of how systems handle truth when presented as evidence, not emotion. The outcome didn't feel final through words. It became final through documentation. My daily life followed clean patterns again. Work hours stayed consistent, emails answered on time, meetings predictable. The absence of distraction created order. My calendar contained no overlapping schedules, no personal conflicts attached to professional space. Routine replaced the noise of uncertainty. Each task completed added another layer of stability. The environment around me adjusted naturally, the way a system resets after removing faulty input. Outside of work, I organized personal accounts and closed anything once shared. Bank statements, subscriptions, and insurance plans listed only my name now. Every change generated an automated confirmation message, each one small but measurable proof of separation. The accumulation of confirmations built clarity. No conversation could equal that level of definition. Occasionally, I heard brief updates from mutual acquaintances. Ben had relocated out of state. Laura had started contract work for a small firm with no direct reporting lines. Their names appeared in public databases, but nowhere in company records. The separation extended beyond personal life. It became digital, institutional, and absolute. Neither of them could alter what had been recorded. Once compliance concludes, history becomes immutable. At the office, I was assigned to oversee new onboarding for data protection. HR asked me to review and refine sections about internal disclosure protocol. My previous submission had become reference material for training. They didn't mention it explicitly, but the structure was identical. I made minor adjustments, tightening definitions and adding sample formatting. My contribution turned into part of the system's education module. Revenge had evolved into prevention, quietly improving the framework that exposed them. Looking back, the chain of events felt mechanical. One observation led to documentation, documentation led to validation, validation led to outcome. Nothing required emotion to function. Systems respond to data, not to feeling. That principle stayed constant from start to finish. Where most people expect confrontation, procedure accomplishes more through silence. Sometimes, late at night, I opened the final letter from HR. The single line stating "case resolved" carried no weight beyond formality. It symbolized efficiency, not closure. The real closure existed in knowing every fact I presented remained unchanged and verifiable. The truth no longer required my involvement. It maintained itself through record keeping. That is the form of justice only structure can produce: measured, calm, and permanent. Now, when colleagues mention trust or workplace ethics, I remind them quietly. Verification is better than confrontation. It's not cynicism, it's accuracy. Systems built on proof endure longer than emotions built on assumption. I learned that procedure, when executed cleanly, removes the need for revenge altogether. It delivers results that no argument can undo. I kept one folder from the entire process, labeled Reference Closed. It contains the HR notice, the divorce decree, and the compliance letter. Nothing more. Together they represent the end of one system and the stability of another. Proof replaces sentiment. Documentation replaces doubt. In the end, that's all structure needs to function correctly. What would you have done differently? Comment your opinion below. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories.